Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to a cold but lovely Loch Etive. This video's introduction is a little different from my usual boating ones, because I wanted to thank you all for watching the videos, and especially to those who have subscribed. When the channel reached 1,000 subscribers, YouTube now compresses new videos with a better VP9 codec, which preserves a better quality video for you to watch. Therefore, it's well worth considering subscribing if you have not already done so. I recently invested in some new camera equipment to also improve the videos. I purchased a gimbal and a Sony RX100 Mark VII camera, as I was finding the wide-angle lens of the GoPro camera very limiting. They tend to make mountains look like hills and waves look like ripples, which the Sony cameras replicate as they are. This video now illustrates the new equipment, as it's filmed entirely on the Sony camera. Thanks again for watching, and to those who subscribe, it's very much appreciated. I started setting up my 2.75 metre F-rib on the shore beside Kelly's Pier at 7 AM on a cold November morning. I was keen to try out my new video equipment, and where better than filming lovely Loch Etive. The sun was still below the hills, and a steady breeze was blowing from the north. The cold made the PVC tubes much stiffer to move than in the warm summer months. I'm well rehearsed at assembling the boat, and 10 minutes later I was sliding it across the slippery seaweed and into the water. The 6 horsepower Yamaha 4-stroke started second pull and was soon warming up nicely. Then it was time to head off. Just as the sun started to arise above the horizon. Which meant that the lighting was rather drab at the start of my journey, but it also meant I would hopefully catch much better light as it happened. I must admit that I was finding the Ronin SC gimbal an excellent piece of kit, although much heavier than my normal GoPro camera gimbal. It certainly kept the Sony camera steady as a rock. And I was over the moon with the new Sony camera, as it showed exactly how close I was to the water's edge. The GoPro tended to suggest I was always further away, due to its wide-angle lens. Talking about lenses, the Sony also has a 200mm zoom lens, which I'm certain this seal appreciated. Of course, I also have full control over the Sony camera's exposure, aperture and focus, whereas the GoPro had an on and off button. My issue at present is because I have the camera in a polythene bag with only the lens poking out. To prevent it getting wet, it's a little awkward to operate some of the controls. That is a big advantage of the GoPro, it's completely waterproof, and as such I will still use it on the very wet days. So that explains why my videos going forward will hopefully provide a better viewing experience. Which brings me back to my day's adventure. I was thoroughly enjoying pottering along the edge of Loch Etive. The autumn colours on the banks were truly spectacular. A wind had dropped completely, allowing the trees and hills to reflect on the water surface. Yep, I was in my promised land again. and all I had to do was to watch and wait for the sun to climb above the hills and colour the landscape with its golden touch. The trees and leaves on the bank were patiently waiting for it too. Some of the hills on the northern bank were now benefiting from its gentle touch. I decided to land at Caddersley Bothy to have a walk and a coffee to give the sun time to rise above the southern hills. Unfortunately, I couldn't help but notice a band of clouds collecting above Ben Cruachan. I hoped they would clear again and not spread out over the other summits as they often do. To give the clouds time to decide, I went my walk. My dry suit trousers keep my feet warm and dry even in the muddiest of conditions, which is just as well as there had been a lot of rain lately. The walk was helping warming me up, as I'd found it quite chilly sitting in the boat in the early hours of the morning. I didn't go into the bothy as condensation in the windows were an indication that it was being used by someone, so left them in peace. Instead I stood outside and admired the views. The cloud was starting to spread across the loch, and I wondered if I would see the sun again, so I went back to the boat and settled down to slurp my morning coffee. And enjoy the silence of this special place. As I slurped, I contemplated on clouds and asked them to clear again. I guess someone in high was listening to my slurping, because the sun started to shine and illuminated the landscape perfectly. It was my sign to clamber back into the boat and continue filming. The mighty mountain of Ben Starrive was truly magnificent. And way beyond it, the Glencoe mountains of Buccleuchted Moor and Buccleuchted Beg shimmered in the sun. And if the sun was now done, I would still have been a happy man, but it shone on me for the rest of the day as I happily went on my way. This for me is what makes off-season boating so special. A low sun and long shadows cast by clouds paint a vibrant scene, the likes I've never seen in summer. The dappled hills are like a never-ending kaleidoscope of autumn colour. I know only too well that there are only a few days in a year that are as beautiful as this one, so I take my time to savour it all. There is no rush hour in my promised land. As I have plenty of time, I decide to land at Ruba Bar. A decade or so ago, this was my favourite camping ground. Sadly, it's been changed lately, as there is now a stone jetty and road access, which spoils the wilderness appeal. I presume it's for transporting the logs down the loch when they start felling the commercial growing forest. Still, it's always nice to have a nosy around, and this grass is hollow ground, as I always pitch my tent here. It's a shelter spot with a view. Distant memories came flooding back as I walked the beach and then strolled along the river. Little did I realise back then that one day I would live in the area. I came here to escape the stresses of a working life, so perhaps I was always destined to retire here. Old memory cells refreshed, I clambered back in the boat and headed further up the loch in my promised land. This area of forest is a designated special site of scientific interest and thus protected. It's mostly ancient oak and birch trees, but parts are from the original Caledonian pine forests. The wind was now freshening and roughening the loch's surface. As I'm equally at home in my small boat or on land, I decided to stop and enjoy this part of the woodland by foot. The tide was still falling, so I knew a rear anchor with the transom grounded would keep the boat safe while I went walkabout. My old legs were a bit stiff from sitting in the boat so long, and the going was hard, but I knew there was a good path not far from the shore. In fact, I was delighted to find it only 30 metres away. My problem now was deciding which way to go to see the best views, so I solved it by going first one way and then the other. And as per the old proverb, I took my heart for a walk in the woods, and listened to the magic whispers of the old trees. And it was truly magic looking down on the loch from on high. Many years ago, before modern roads were built, as it was a main transport link by boat from Oban to Glencoe, this path would have been much busier then too, as crofters drove their cattle along it to the markets. Now it's but a faint track almost lost in time. Having thoroughly enjoyed my walk in the wood, which gave me another perspective of the loch that I love so well, I headed back to the boat and found it exactly as I left it. Not that it surprised me in the slightest, as there wasn't anyone within miles. And as it was now lunchtime, I sat on the shore and scoffed my picnic. I was a small but happy human, alone in a big, big world. After lunch, it was an easy job sliding the lightweight boat down the sandy slope and back into the water. I turned to head to the very end of the loch, now less than a mile away. However, the ever-freshening breeze made progress slow, so when I reached Air Traleachan, I about turned and started to head for home. I had another fantastic day in the water and enjoyed making the video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Thanks for watching.